Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a senior and accomplished professional and an author from Dubai, Mr. Gautam Ganglani. Gautam, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ashutosh. An absolute pleasure to be with you here
Thank
today.
Thank you. Gautam is the CEO or the Chief Energizing Officer of Right Selection Corporate Events, a leading global speakers management and coaching company. He's also an author of a book titled Breaking Bread. So, Gautam, tell me a little bit about your journey and what was the inspiration to create Right Selection Global Thought Leadership?
Thank you so much, Ashutosh. Yes, well, on a personal level, I was born and brought up in London, UK. So the first foundation years of my journey was 20 years in the UK,
Mhm.
and then moved to Dubai in my early 20s. Actually, was thanks and inspired by my dad. He founded the company Right Selection in October 1993, and his passion was all about books that transform lives, both personally and professionally. And he opened the first ever new age self-help nonfiction bookstore under the name of Right Selection in that year. I graduated in 1995 and joined him. And that's where the journey sort of began as a bookstore, which evolved over the last 30 years as a family legacy, from books to audios to helping companies build a library, and then automatically then bringing the authors of these books for live inspirational events in the Gulf and India. So that's been sort of the transformation journey.
Very interesting. You're also, an organization that manages speakers. And therefore, my question is, what separates a good keynote speaker from a transformational thought leader?
That's a fantastic question. Yes, we've had the pleasure of engaging several global and regional speakers for large scale conferences in the region. And to me, the speakers who are positioned as thought leaders and add tremendous value to a transformation journey for a leader, for a company, are those who not only inspire, educate, and engage their audiences, but actually leave them with a sort of plan that they can take away and apply back into their lives. Because otherwise, it's an event, it's an experience, it's inspirational. But what can we take away from a thought leader, from a speaker, back into our personal professional that can add even more value and have that change? So that to me is the distinction between a good speaker and a great speaker.
Very interesting. And, when companies come to you to ask you to get them a speaker, what are some of the biggest mistakes you have noticed companies make while selecting speakers for conferences?
That's a intriguing question, Ashutosh. I mean, I say what comes to my mind is sometimes conference organizers focus on the brand of the speaker or
Hmm.
the celebrity and influence space. And to me, you really want to make sure that speaker is not only well known for a great book or well known because of some accolade in their professional journeys, but they actually can engage an audience of the size and leave that audience inspired, engaged, and sort of feel great value from the talk. So
Hmm.
sometimes they give more importance at times to the speaker's brand, and sometimes miss out on the importance of the content that will be
Hmm.
shared, the delivery style, tonality, energy. All these play a part in the experience of keeping your audience engaged,
Hmm.
especially with the attention spans reducing, as we know.
Yeah, very interesting. And tell me, what kind of trends or AI trends are shaping the future of global conferences and leadership summits?
Could you repeat that, Ashutosh? Sorry.
I say that, given so much technology is coming into conferences and summits, and
Yes.
you handle a lot of these, what kind of trends or AI trends are beginning to shape the future of such conferences?
Yeah, I think, in fact, what's happening is we realize that human connection and AI need to be integrated. It's not either or, it's and, it's both. And that synergy is there where what experience in a conference can be automated is the experience in the build up to the conference, during the conference, in terms of engaging the audiences with technology through the phones,
Hmm.
and post the event and keeping them engaged with the people in the communities they may have built. So
mm,
I think technology adds that before, during, and after to enhance the experience that every delegate has.
mm.
And obviously, nothing beats human interaction in meeting and emotionally connecting with your audience, be it your peers, be it with the speakers, be it with the organizers. So I think it's the synergy of both would brings tremendous value.
Well said. Um, in a world full of online content, YouTube is just full of so much knowledge. Why do live speakers still matter?
That's a fantastic question. In fact, many of my friends still ask me today, and the analogy I'll give on a lighter note, but something that you can surely connect with is, you know, when we think of the music world, and our favorite artist, whatever he or she may be, that favorite song, that favorite music, we have the pleasure of listening to that on YouTube, on the TVs in our homes, in the cars, on a podcast. We could listen that at no cost at all, but still there's an aspiration, there's an excitement, there's an emotional attachment to that music.
Mm,
And we will invest, drive hours to a show, stand in queues, and it's a 2 hour experience where you would be amongst thousands of people.
mm,
And just to be in that whole euphoria of listening to that music live moves us emotionally at a completely different level.
mm,
Um, so that would be an analogy I'd explain. But the beauty I tell my friends and I share with you today is that in our events, when we have audiences of 100 to 500, you actually get a chance to even meet the author or the speaker. You
yeah.
get a chance to shake hands with him or her. You get to potentially get a signed book. And that just adds unprecedented value
Mm,
in the experience in terms of meeting your teacher, your thought leader, the author, which who he or she could have changed your life.
amazing. You know, and I was reading about you, I was quite fascinated, that you are a coach, you're an author, you do a lot of work on leadership. So next few questions are on leadership and coaching.
Sure.
How can leaders remain authentic in an increasingly technology-driven workplace?
Yes, I guess technology and AI and is omnipresent in all our lives. So what makes us unique is every one of us is a unique human being. Every one of us has a unique leadership style. There are all different types of leaders, and at the end of the day, I think the right people will connect with the right leader who is authentic, who's down to earth, who's approachable, who's the best version of themselves. People will always connect emotionally, intellectually with people that they feel are um, real. And that's something which I don't think has changed in what I've experienced personally as a leader. I'm a people's person leader. I like to engage our teams. And I think that stands the test of time in terms of the
Mm,
authenticity, the vulnerability, the genuineness, the empathy. These are things which AI cannot or tech cannot replace.
well said. You've also worked closely with legendary thinkers like Marshall Goldsmith and Stephen Covey. What have you personally worked while working with them?
Yeah, from really grateful to, from every speaker,
Mm,
you take away learnings. And I've spent not only professional time, but personal time. In fact, some of the greatest learnings are on a flight, at an airport, over a meal, when you break bread. And in that sense, with Marshall Goldsmith, his title itself speaks for itself. His most famous book out of his 20 books that he's written are What Got You Here Won't Get You There. Now, that itself tells you that, the book is actually about the 20 greatest habits that every leader must encompass in his or her life. And
mm,
to me, we need to keep evolving. And to him, he tells me that have the mindset of being a startup with 30 years experience.
mm,
And I say that today, I'm not 30 years experience from a brand point of view, but I say, in fact, by being a startup leader, you actually are hungry to continuously learn despite your wealth of experience. And
mm,
today's speed of change, technology is changing. A
mm,
speaker like Stephen Covey, the son of the great Stephen Covey, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, his recent book, which is Trust and Inspire, and his
mm,
bestseller book, Speed of Trust. To me, trust is the core competency, the core value. In fact, he said it's the biggest, most valuable currency in today's world. And
mm,
to me, trust is embodied in me from the family values that we have to the values we have with our customers, our suppliers, and our teams. So trust is something that I've embodied, not only learned from him, but applied into
Mm.
in my lives. One more
Yep.
example I may
Yep.
share is Ron Kaufman, who wrote the book Uplifting Service.
Mm.
To me, he's always about continuously adding more value to your clients, because it's all about the experience. You can't compete on product, on service, on price. You have to compete, if anything, on the human interaction on that. So it's always about what new value can I add, what new to the experience to make me memorable,
Mm.
emotionally engaged, and have loyal customers. So between
Mm.
customer, leadership, and trust, these are three great
Very
lessons I've
interesting.
learned from these speakers.
Very interesting. And therefore, a follow-up question for you, you would say that trust is very important, and you also believe that trust will become the most important leadership currency in the coming years. Tell me more and give me an example if you can.
Yeah, I think one example that comes to mind now is really at the end of the day, you know, for companies to scale, for companies to grow, we need to trust our people. Um,
Mm.
I'm guilty as charged of saying that I've micromanaged at early stages of my life where you suddenly want to hold on to the reins. And we are the biggest strength as a leader and the biggest
Mm.
weakness of our own businesses. Only when we trust our people and empower our people can what he calls the speed of trust take place. Because of
Mm.
speed of trust with your team, they're able to take decisions without feeling they need to check with you each and every time. And
Mm.
therefore business is able to progress, able to thrive, able to scale in your absence. You're able to then focus on being strategically on the business, not in the business. Those kind of analogies only come when you have your high trust teams. And today, I'd say another example would be the loyalty of your teams. People in the past careers, my dad's time would be you stay with the same company for 50 years. You start at 20, you retire at 60, if not 70. And that was regarded as success.
Yeah.
Today, people are changing jobs every year, every 2 years, every 3 years. But when you have a high level of trust and you've empowered them to have an owner's mindset, to have a leadership mindset, the chance of them staying longer than the average of 1 to 3 years is dramatically increased
Mm.
because you've built an ecosystem of trust and empowerment.
Mm. Great response. What common traits do exceptional leaders share across the world stage?
Yeah, I really like that question because it reminds me of when I interviewed during COVID. I interviewed one leader every week for about 50 weeks. And one of
Hmm.
the questions I asked each of them, because I was trying to find out what are the habits of these great leaders. I'm
Mm.
all of different ages, they had different ethnic backgrounds, different experiences. But what I found most common among them consistently was their wake up time in the morning. They all were early risers. Um, Exercise, I would say actually movement was the key word they all used. It wasn't about exercise or the gym because some of them it was Pilates, some of them it was
Yeah.
walking, some of it was squash, tennis.
Mm.
So movement, early mornings, eating right. They wanted to stay intellectually stimulated at all times, and they felt a healthy mind comes from eating right, meditation, yoga. So again, I think really their power mornings were encompassed about taking care of themselves.
Mm.
Came about by saying, I'm the most important person in the world, in my world. And if I take care of myself, that allows
Mm.
me as a leader to be the best version of myself for my family, for my team, for my customers, for everyone I interact with. So they really prioritize taking care of themselves
Mm.
with an early start, and continuously evolving in their learning as well. So
Well said.
these are some of the traits that come to mind.
Mm. Amazing. Let's talk a little bit about coaching now. Um, what role does executive coaching play in navigating uncertainty and disruption?
Yeah, we're living in such challenging and indifferent times, as we know as well. And I'd say what comes to my mind, we've heard this, it's very lonely at the top. It's not just a saying, but I really feel that because however big an organization you are, you have a leadership team. If you're the CEO, if you're the founder of an organization, it certainly can be very lonely. And when you have a coach, during this time, it helps you load shed the various thoughts, which also journaling can do. But in the form of coaching, it allows you to sort of clear your mind. You're asked a lot of great questions, which help you rethink, um, reflect, review, and above all, it helps me with what I would say from my experience of being coached is it gives me clarity of decision making, clarity of thought. Otherwise, the minds are so busy. We've got multiple hats we play personally and professionally in our lives, each one of us, no exceptions.
Yeah.
So I think that an executive coach helps you have a sounding board, ask you the tough questions, helps you provide you the clarity you need to make the best decisions for each and every.
Mm, mm, mm. And a follow-up question for you, Gautam, then would be, how does a world-class coach help leaders overcome stagnation and complacency?
Wow, that's an interesting question. What comes to mind with that is that when you're constantly asked about, let's say, your why or your purpose. Now, when we started our businesses, I had a certain why. Obviously, my dad was the leader of the organization, and it was a father and son family business. Over time, in my business analogy, was then eventually 10 years into the business, people framed it to my dad, okay, you're Gautam's dad. You knew that was that transition. But every time the business evolves or businesses evolve all over the world, is
Mm,
they need to keep looking at their why and their purpose. Now, if it comes to a space of stagnation, um, in that, then you really ask, what is your why at this time and age? And assuming that's 10, 15, 20, 30 years into the business, you need to find a new why and a new purpose at every stage because your
mm,
priorities in your 20s and 30s will obviously change in your 40s, 50s, and even 60s. So I
mm,
think it's really by those conversations you have because ultimately great questions lead to great conversations and those great conversations help us evolve to find the clarity of what drives me now because some
mm,
needs to get me up every morning when my business has been stagnated. Either do I exit the business because I've reached its optimum, I have no other purpose for the business, or I need to
mm,
diversify, or I'm reframing my purpose. It's a legacy I'm creating, I'm passing it on. There needs to be a purpose and a why to
mm,
remove the stagnation or boredom, monotony, which comes to people once they reach a certain level of
mm,
success.
mm. Amazing. Let's talk about your book now. Your book, Breaking Bread. Tell me a little bit about your book. What was your hypothesis when you wrote it?
Yeah, no, actually, I really want to thank my dad because he'd written already 3 or 4 books before I had considered writing Breaking Bread. And from probably 2015, a lot of friends had got them, when you're writing your book? And I'm like, I wouldn't know what I would write my book about. And then I just said, okay, let me sit with the idea. I'm sure it'll fall into place whenever is the right time. You always make different excuses to procrastinate.
Mm,
In early 2020, I was actually in Goa and I'd been invited to speak at a speakers boot camp. And they said, Gautam, we've observed that you have had been at events with, Marshall Goldsmith, Stephen Covey, Robin Sharma, Jack Welch. We see you with kids, we see you with people of all ages. We actually want you to come and talk to us about how to build relationships with people across culture, across age. And that was the topic they invited me. So when I went to this, I said, I don't want to just have a topic or build relationships.
mm,
And the term I use in the UK, which we use called breaking bread, and at that time it was really when you have a meal with a friend or, colleague, in that sense. And I said, okay, let me title the name of my keynote, Breaking Bread, Building Meaningful Relationships. And that was the title of this keynote. Little did I know the keynote was actually recorded and transcribed, and I was given that. And I read the transcription. I said, wow, this could be the start of the book. I've got the foundation ready.
mm,
And that's what prompted me in 2020 to start writing the book. And obviously, it led on to COVID. This boot camp was in Goa in February. We went into COVID, and suddenly we're at home. I had more time than ever. And I said, no time like the present.
yeah.
And I put the book together, collated a lot of true stories from my experience. And by August 15th, actually, was the launch date 2020. And one simple thing I want to share in this context was that I said, I want this book to be read by people who don't normally read books.
Mm,
My learning was books like Who Moved My Cheese, Whale Done, The Fish Philosophy. They were simple, powerful books, but with profound, deep meaning. And I think a lot of people who don't read as much read those books. And that's where I kept the book literally like just over 100 pages. And I just shared 5 key strategies of how do you break bread and with some true story to sort of give
mm,
that sort of encouragement for people to do that more often.
mm. Very interesting. And a follow-up question for you on your book, you talk of relationships. Uh, why, in your view, are relationships still the foundation of success?
Well, to me, families that eat together, stay together is something that I stand by.
Yeah.
And that's my foundation, that we've had a Sunday family meal from my childhood days till today. And that's been a top priority for my family experience. It starts with that. In my company, we had a ritual when we had a larger team that every Friday we would have a team lunch together. And we were like 8 to 10 employees.
Mm,
Everyone would bring their meal from home, and you could eat food,
mm,
anything except what you brought from home.
mm,
These experiences created profound experiences for our team members because they got to eat food from different cultures and different homes. And to me, food is an energy exchange
yeah.
between two people. So relationships are built over breakfast, lunch, dinner, whether it's with your family, your teams, and even your customers. As I share in my book, I'm really grateful to my wife. We had the pleasure of hosting over 100 dinners at home. So when
Mm,
we've had these thought leaders like Marshall Goldsmith or Stephen Covey, Ron Kaufman visit
mm,
Dubai or even Mumbai for our events, we would host them at home uh,
mm,
and build what you'd say a personal and professional friendship with them, and
mm,
invite our clients into these curated, customized dinners. And that to me is what stands good, that my dad said the most important bank account is not your financial one. Money comes and goes in life. But the most
mm,
important bank account is your relationship, is your
mm,
emotional bank account. That's
mm,
the relationship capital you build with people. And I really feel that I'm really blessed and grateful that I feel I could call a lot of people in my network because I have that emotional bank account of building those
yeah.
relationships over time,
Yeah.
that they're there for you to support you personally, professionally, give you time because you've made time to build those relationships authentically, sincerely, with integrity.
Mm, very interesting. And my last question for you, Gautam. If you had to give one piece of advice to young professionals and my viewers and listeners aspiring to become influential leaders and speakers, what would it be?
Learning's a lifetime journey. Mahatma Gandhi said, "Stop learning, stop living."
Mm,
To me, in today's world, as we can see, knowledge is power. Knowledge with action is even more superior power. But it's really, we have to have a mindset of learning, sharing, giving, contributing, collaborating, and be hungry to learn and apply that in every area of your life. To me, my dad is my greatest inspiration. At the age of 75 plus, he's learning Claude, he's learning Notion, he's learning AI. And to me, he attends seminars and events till today. And he just says it's just a breath of fresh air to keep learning how things are changing and to apply
mm.
that in our lives personally and professionally. So be
Very,
hungry to learn and
very interesting. And on that note, Gautam, I just want to say what a fascinating conversation this has been. Thank you for speaking to me about your journey, about leadership. We spoke about coaching. We spoke about being a good speaker. And we finally spoke about your book, Breaking Bread. Thank you for speaking to me and good luck to you.
thank you so much, Ashutosh. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the brand called You.